Hi everyone, welcome to LGIU's Fireside Chats, our new interview series for the Future Local Lab. In this series, we'll be joined by guests from around the world to discuss what the future holds for local government, with the emphasis firmly on what the sector can do now to start preparing for that future. I'm Bea, a content officer at LGIU.
Hello, and I'm Freya Millard, Head of Content at LGIU. So today we're delighted to be sitting down with Mary Agostino, the interim CEO of Mitchell Shire Council, which is Victoria's fastest growing municipality.
Mary is a highly experienced local government senior executive with an extensive record of achievement. She previously worked at the City of Whittlesea as the Director of Partnership and Engagement and as the Executive Manager of Advocacy. Mary has spent most of her career supporting Melbourne's growth corridors, working closely with diverse communities to understand their needs and create resilience.
So in recognition of her remarkable leadership during the bushfire and COVID-19 response and recovery efforts, Mary was inducted into the Victorian Honour Roll of Women in 2021. It is with that resume and acclaim that we are very excited to welcome Mary to the Future Local Lab and have this opportunity to dive into her insights on local government leadership and talk to her about her experience in building sustainable, self-determined communities that are resilient for the future. So Mary, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
And thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here in different timelines across the world.
Yes, that is the beauty of the Future Local Lab. So before we get into the heart of our discussion, can we just take a second to talk a bit about your journey in local government, where your interest in the sector began and how you sort of began your career?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story for me because I worked in banking prior to local government, and then I had my daughter and I didn't want to go back working in the main city of Victoria, Melbourne. And a friend of mine worked in local government. She said, why don't you come and work with us? And there was a job as a cashier. And I worked in banking, so I said, all right, I'll take anything. And it was part-time and it suited me, and my husband was up the road. And I started off as the cashier in local government. And I just realised there was a world of opportunity in local government. And then I thought, I really love community services. People from there, they do really cool things. They're out with the community, they're talking to them. So from being the cashier, I went into an admin function in community services, and I loved it. I loved every moment of it. I started off in the early years, and then I just kept progressing through local government and looking at things that really interested me. And I used to shadow people. I moved into, later in my career, into advocacy as a general manager of advocacy and other elements. And I started by shadowing one of the directors and saying, I really love what you do. Do you mind if I just tag along every now and then? And he was very generous. So I think there's a real generosity in local government, 100 careers. So you can pick and choose what interests you. And I always tell anyone coming in that's new, look around. Don't be stuck where you are. See what interests you and who you can learn from. And growth areas, I love growth areas. Growth areas are never dull. You have to plan. The year 2050 in planning terms is today. So how you plan for communities, how you build that resilience through good planning, I think is a major interest to me. And that's what's led me to Mitchell Shire and its growth agenda.
Amazing. And that is such an interesting sort of journey through the different aspects of the sector of different councils to get where you are today. So reflecting on your experience in local government, for example, your recognition for outstanding leadership during the bushfire and COVID-19 crisis, how have these challenges sort of shaped your approach to leadership? Because they are big ones, to say the least.
So in that period, I remember my CEO at the time, David Turnbull, probably one of the best CEOs I've ever worked with. He got sick. He just, had an illness and he had to take some time off. And as he took that time off, he said to me, Mary, you're going to go in as acting CEO. And I really fought against it. It was never a path that I wanted at that point. And he said, look, I really want you to lead the organisation at the moment. And I remember COVID breaking out as I entered into that role. And anyway, with COVID breaking out, I don't know, there was this immediate kind of, logic to how you had to behave and what you had to do. And it was an unknown thing. And working from home wasn't a thing back then. And so our IT department just kicked in straight away and set us up at home as well. So it's funny how a paradigm shift can happen so quickly and how people can respond so fast. So during that time, The CEO progressively got more ill. We had fires break out in Victoria at the same time. So some of our team went up to help those fire-affected communities. So we had COVID, sick CEO, and we had fires in Victoria that we assisted with. So it was just this real interesting time. And during that little period too, the state government generously gave us money to put on people that were actually unemployed because of COVID. So we put on 74 new staff. We did a whole lot of fantastic work. And I don't know, the Victorian government went, we're going to recognise you for it. And that was the long and short of it. But it was a period where people really rallied together. And I love that strength of leadership, but it was at all levels in the organisation and in the community as well. So community were helping each other, supporting each other. Our service system changed to help people that were vulnerable, who couldn't get to a library, who couldn't get food. I don't know, it was just this really incredible time. And all those lessons we've taken into new service delivery models, how we work at home, how we run our lives. So there were so many learnings, and me personally as a leader, on what I was able to achieve. So, yeah, that's the story of that period and why the state government recognised me. You know, I was standing there and I was being honoured with these 20 other women. One woman from Melbourne University had cracked a code on how to pick fraud and money laundering worldwide. She had cracked a code that banks worldwide use, and I was standing there going, why am I in her company? She's amazing. And she said to me, well, what's your story? And I told her, and I thought, my story isn't that remarkable, but I found the presence of these women amazing.
That's really interesting. And I think we would beg to differ and say that your story is remarkable and really is worthy of being up there. Yeah, really interesting to sort of have all those different aspects going on at the same time, juggling so many different issues, like very big ones. I guess in terms of your decision making at the time, do you find that now things are maybe hopefully a little bit more stable? Has that sort of going through those really tough times helped your approach now to get ahead, to plan forward look?
Yeah, decision making in a crisis, you have to remain calm, right? Any hysteria, people will react with you. I am a very outgoing sort of person. There was this real lovely calmness, but I was also surrounded by a team where I really maximised their expertise. From our, officer who, analysed risk. She did a lot of work around the risks and the risks to staff, our health and safety, and our executive team and our managers all rallied. And I lent on them to share their expertise in their fields and made decisions based on the best knowledge. Most decisions you make as a leader or in any role, you kind of know your boundaries, you know what's possible, but we kind of pushed outside all those local government boundaries and we explored what we could do, and we met almost daily as a team. So there was a lot of communication and it was efficient. We'd all be on screen, quick service review, quick decisions, yep, yay, nay. So the decision making, it was about very practical things day to day. It wasn't long-term planning. It was how we're going to do the next week, how we're going to do the next month. What if this progressed? And we did a bit of scenario planning as well. So, yeah, relying on others and leaning on expertise, and you make informed and good decisions, and they don't need to be laboured.
That is really interesting. In terms of sort of looking towards the future, as obviously that's part of what we do here at Future Local Lab, and what key goals are you working on for Mitchell Shire Council, and how are you setting that path right now to achieve those goals?
I've been working on Mitchell Shire Council from the day I walked in that door. There's a lot of great examples of good growth and bad growth decisions. So for Mitchell Shire Council, when they move into a brand new suburb, it's not going to be the panacea of everything you need in life, but some basic things need to be there. So my whole goal is about having some of those basic things in a new community. So for Mitchell Shire, I've been I'm ambitious for the community that isn't there yet, but I'm also ambitious for the community that actually is there, because we've got this fantastic community that's been there for generations in other parts of the Shire. So not losing their not losing focus on them. But in terms of growth, I've started off this session saying 2050 is today in planning terms. So some of the things that we've embedded is service planning. So we've planned out the next 30 years based on a range of assumptions. How many households we'll have, 3.1 people per household, some of the needs of those households. The other principles are have some basic things when those communities move in. I'm really proud to say, and I know you don't have context for this, but we've got a major freeway called the Hume Freeway that takes people from one state to the other. Our community sits on both sides of this major freeway. Our growing communities. And one thing we've done, we've planned out all the interchanges onto that freeway, and I'm really happy to say they've all been funded. They haven't been delivered yet. And I know that might sound really trite, but it gets people to jobs. It gets people to the supermarket. It gets people moving up and down a corridor. So that's one element. Jobs, jobs, jobs. A goal of 1 job per household. Transport. Having hubs and mental health and family violence services is what we fight for and plan for. So long-term planning and short, sharp advocacy funding, getting funding for projects, they're really important. How people live is really important to me and our team at Mitchell Shire. And learning. Unfortunately, we don't always learn from mistakes of the past. And there's some really huge growth areas that have already populations of 300,000. Some of their basic services still aren't there. So I'm trying not to repeat some of those errors of the past, and I'm trying constantly to get things in early. What you don't want to be doing is retrofitting these communities in 20, 30 years. So the more we focus on them and getting them right will be a lot less pressure on community and government in 20, 30 years. So I know that's a very long explanation, but getting it right now for 30 years from now and being the voice of the communities that aren't there.
That is brilliant. And I do think it's that proactiveness that we all need to embrace, really, when we look at the big challenges facing us.
Can I add one more point?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And pushing government to discomfort sometimes. Policies don't always support good outcomes. If we've got time, I'll give you a great example.
Yeah, please, yes.
Right now, we've got a brand new community in Beveridge, and people have built homes in this area, and the government has said, if you've got anything under the ground, it has to come out to support growth, basalt, building houses. And we're not anti-quarry at Mitchell Shire. But the government, in its wisdom, has said, we're going to put a quarry right in the middle of this brand new suburb. A quarry. So sometimes you've got to challenge. Like, a policy is fine. Have an extractive industry policy, not a problem. But don't retrofit it into where people have bought their homes already. So sometimes you've got to push government. We're pushing hard on this one to say, not on. 2 land uses that are totally opposed to each other, and people have bought homes on the premise that there will be no quarry there. You've got to challenge government for good outcomes for community.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think that is a central role of local government, to be that voice when national government, state government, imposes aspects that they might not consider the local context the way that because you do it day in, day out.
Well, while we're on the topic of Mitchell Shire's goals and objectives and getting future ready, I wanted to discuss the Mitchell Community Energy Hub and the Goulburn Murray Solar Savers program. As we know, local governments everywhere increasingly need to focus on sustainability and reducing cost of living pressures. And these programs are great examples of forward-thinking planning and execution at the local level to tackle these kinds of challenges. Can you tell us a bit more about how these programs were developed and why you're prioritising these areas specifically?
Yeah, look, of course. I'll give you a really great example of an economic outcome coming out of really fantastic sustainability initiatives from these groups. We were approached as council, and they identified one of our towns and one of our sports and aquatic centres, and said, if you put solar panels on the aquatic centre, you'll save probably within, a 5-year period, the money and the cost for the solar panels. And we did. We We invested $120,000, which, you know, we're not a rich council, and so it doesn't not sound globally a lot of money, but it was a bit of money. Well, the return on that investment was 2 years. So now we go into a cost neutral situation that doesn't cost us 60 grand a year for electricity costs. So A, we're saving the environment. B, we're saving on energy costs. One other element, and this is not related to those two groups, but we've got a freight terminal that's going to be in Beveridge, and I spoke about it, with 6,800 jobs there and 20,000 around the perimeter. But it will have the highest solar energy generating panels in the Southern Hemisphere. Yeah, and across the road, I keep saying, can we bring all that energy to those 30,000 new homes across the road? But anyway, we're working on some of that. But also what we're working on is, at one of our water authorities is also building, I think, 20,000 homes across the road from the freight terminal. So what we're working with that water authority is waste minimisation on site, so no waste collections in the traditional sense. We're working on water, A-grade water, servicing our new sports fields, our infrastructure. So there's some fantastic innovation work in these growth areas, and community groups, as you've mentioned, have been at the core of pushing us into a new reality.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really fascinating. And, as I said before, sustainability and cost of living is definitely a universal challenge, and it's faced by not just local governments, but all governments all across the world. So there's definitely a lot we can learn from those great programs. Shifting a little bit away from Mitchell Shire Council specifically and looking more at you, Mary, given your experience or extensive experience working in Melbourne's growth corridors, what strategies have you found most effective for building resilient communities in rapidly growing areas?
How you build resilience in brand new communities, it's I think, a real formula. People come into these communities often without any support services. So you've got often families, young families, no grandparents, no childcare, local childcare, and sometimes with only one vehicle to support a family. Who's going to get that vehicle? The prime money earner who's got to get out of that suburb and go to employment. So often you get some real vulnerability and women isolated. And in some of our communities, we've got a lot of South Asian new communities, members moving in, and often that they have their parents moving in as well to support them with childcare and other matters, and they don't have any support systems either. So you've got sometimes the parents, sometimes the grandparents, and isolation and lack of transport options. So creating resilience is about having some basic elements there from the day a community moves in. A service hub. And one of our new areas, the hub, I walk in and we've got this fantastic hub coordinator there, and in the corner are all these men sitting there having a coffee, playing cards, just chit-chatting. And we've got multicultural play groups. We've got kinder services. So that hub creates a link for community to community, and the programs we run in there, we've got a little mini library service, we've got children's activities. So having some basic services, making sure community are connected to each other. The other day I caught a lady from India talking to a gentleman from India, and she had just moved into this suburb not long ago, and she said, when does it get better? And my heart broke for her. And I was eavesdropping, in a nice way. Not because I was being nosy, but I heard her and I felt her pain. And he said, it takes 5 years to adjust. And I thought, 5 years, this poor woman, she's feeling, and she was saying, I feel lonely. I feel like there's nothing to do here. And yeah, and I could see her. And then I thought, she lifted because he told her some of the things that she could do. But it will take 5 years for you to feel really like you belong. But he gave her some instruction, And one of them was, he said, she's got little kids, get them involved in things and you meet the other parents. It was really good advice. But yeah, creating those connections for that community, having some base services. And what we've got at Mitchell Shire is also we've got a high level of family violence rates. And, that's a gender equity issue. But some of those contributing factors are very real. There's financial stress, we've got the mortgage belt, we've got the lack of services. And that's also where we're pushing government to say you need some basic level of service here as well from day one. Anyway, it's a long story short.
No, that's really interesting. I do feel like that social connection is something maybe you don't think about as much when you talk about growth areas, and actually it sounds so critical to how the area thrives or doesn't thrive potentially if it's not there.
And from a local government perspective is just making sure you plan in and have a priority around some piece of infrastructure that connects community from day one.
And on your point about taking time to adjust, when it comes to building resilient communities, is there any advice you give to local leaders when it comes to balancing the needs of both established and emerging communities?
Yeah, look, don't neglect anyone, and explain the story. Now, we've got fantastic communities right up and down our corridor, and some are rural communities. And now and then I hear, they're getting everything in the south, which is where the growth is. And the growth guys go, everything is being done up north. So it's explaining a story to everyone about who's getting what and why. And I think once you explain to those more established communities and you say, they've got nothing down south, and we collect developer contributions from developers so we can build some of these infrastructure, and people don't often know that. You have to explain things and educate the community. And once you do, people get it. People want other people to succeed. I believe in the good of everyone. And those other communities, they've got needs too. And we had this fantastic community panel recently. We've got a new council and they're writing their new council plan, and we invited 40 community members, different ages, different cohorts, right across the municipality, rural, growth, everywhere. And once those 40 community members said, wow, we now get why council's so challenged in trying to balance everything, and they prioritised for us, and it was a fantastic exercise. So I think communities, they also have their own solutions on how you tackle problems. I think drawing on them often helps.
No, that's brilliant. That's really interesting. Is there a particular initiative you've championed in either a growth corridor or in creating a more self-determined community which you're most proud of?
Can I talk about two?
Of course.
Yeah, I think one of my professional highs was working with our First Nations people when I worked at the City of Whittlesea, and they came to council and they said, we want you to think about us in the context of all the work you're doing. And I was pretty ashamed. Not that they shamed me, but I felt ashamed that I wasn't on top of some of the challenges our First Nation children were experiencing, families. I mean, I knew it from a data perspective, and I knew it from, some of the challenges and the statistics and the outcomes for children weren't maybe as great. Anyway, I met the community and they threw out that gauntlet and said, well, we want to work with you, and our childcare and our children are our number one priority. And they had a few other priorities. And I thought, all right, I can tackle that. So we had this old kindergarten. It was old and it was pretty ordinary and in a really good suburban location. And I said to them, well, we've got this old kinder and we got 40,000 from the state government, and we polished it up and we worked with the community to get this up and going. And they said to me, the governance model will be only Aboriginal people will sit on that board and run the kinder. And they really pushed and challenged me. And they said to me these wise words. And they said, Mary, if you get it right for us, you'll get it right for any community. The principles will be the same. Anyway, long story short, the minute we opened that little kinder with 20 kids, and they had to be Aboriginal, the board had to be Aboriginal, and the community were working towards Aboriginal employment in that kinder. So anyway, they set all the parameters. The federal government went, hey, we're going to roll out 38 new centres across Australia, and we're going to fund a brand new centre for you guys. And anyway, we thought, great, this is fantastic. Anyway, the community said to me, hey, listen, don't think that's your money. So we got funded for one in Whittlesea, and they said, it's not your money. This is Aboriginal money, and we'll tell you how you're going to spend it. And I remember my CEO at the time, the government rang us. I remember the phone call, and I rang him up and I said, they want a piece of land. I said, where? And he goes, just tell them yes. Don't worry about it. We'll find it. And I thought, that's leadership in local government. We found a piece of land in front of our recreation centre, library, next to the station, near the main strip of shops. It was gold, but we had to run it by councillors at the time. And the councillors at the time, I remember we took it to them and we said, look, this is where we want to put this centre. And they said, well, how about other community groups? And I remember my CEO who just made my jaw drop. He said, councillors, this is in the greater good. And that moment, the councillors supported that project. Then we built this brand new, beautiful, sparkly centre. The community were involved in almost every nail of that wall. They got the governance model 12 years on. The kids that are coming out of that centre are really doing well. Children are staying in with their families. It's a cultural program respecting Aboriginal culture. And I go, the outcomes of that project to this day make me proud. I'm still involved with them, even if I don't work in that municipality anymore, but I still stay, I'm very nosy with them. And they call me every now and then. So I'm very proud. So that's one. And can I tell you one more or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us another one.
One more story, and then you can tell me to shut up. Brand new growth area, city of Whittlesea. They needed a new rail line. Now, getting a rail line is really hard work, and this is 2012, and that rail line wasn't going to come on till 2036. And the community came to me again, and they said, Mary, can council help us get this rail line? Go, okay, let's see. But it wasn't the number one priority. It was an interchange on that old Hume Highway, which my Shire that I work for now is the neighbour to this other council. Anyway, I thought, but you know what? Let's go for it. All right, we're never going to maybe get an opportunity like that again. So the community, the local paper and council buddied up together. And we ran a campaign for 8 months, and we had a story in that paper for 8 months. At the end of the 8 months, we got it funded. It was on deck, I think, 4 years later, and it took 1 million car trips off the main road in a year. So community can drive change.
Those are both fantastic examples of that local power across the board as well. That's where local government is so powerful, when it harnesses the different aspects of the local community and brings it together for one or two common goals. It's just so impressive.
Absolutely. Freya took the words out of my mouth before. What incredible programs to be a part of. I'm sure there were probably at least a couple of lessons that you've learnt by being a part of those initiatives. Is there any core advice you would give to other leaders from your experience with those initiatives?
Yep. Don't assume you know what community want. You talk to community. You get them involved, and they can be the champions. There's nothing more boring than local government going on their own to a minister and going, it's white noise sometimes. The most powerful moments I've seen, and I remember a young man at where I work now talking to the Minister for Health. We took him into the city and he spoke. Normally a minister will shove you out of the door. After 20 minutes, you've got your moment. We were there for an hour and a bit, and this young man secured money for us. We created a space for youth mental health services. It was on the back of that voice. So listen to community, harness them, work with them and value them. You don't have to do it on your own.
That's really good advice. Yeah, fantastic. So, reflecting on your successes in securing investment for these different infrastructure projects, how can local government leaders better advocate for their community needs and secure those necessary resources for that long-term growth?
Don't have a big shopping list. Pick the top 10 most important things for that community. Find partners. Who can you partner with? Don't do it on your own. Like, I partner with everyone at the not-for-profit sector, business sector, developers. Usually they're standing with me somewhere. Partner, partner, partner. Don't do it on your own. Use other people's resources. Let them use yours.
Do you have any advice around how you cultivate those partnerships and make sure they are strong and, good and result in a good outcome?
Tell them the reality. It doesn't have to be a win-win. 50-50, it can be a 70-30, you get your outcome. Look, I partner sometimes with authorities that haven't got a voice because they can't push against government. But I've got a voice and local government's got a voice. So sometimes, we can benefit some of their outcomes. I partner with the not-for-profit sector. They often don't have capital, but I'm building 20 new hubs in the next 30 years. I can build additional consult rooms. I've got capital. We partner for benefit of the community, and often people want to work with you. And I'll give you a really great example. Recently, we want to build a major sports facility and a partnership with actually another government, foreign government, right? So we want to bring in this investment. They're fantastic developers. They're high quality. They see, obviously, their outcome is to get communities buying their property, but they also have a reputation of creating something really livable. They've got some skill, we've got some skill. There's some real benefit. You just got to be honest in the partnership, and if something's not right, you say it. It's heads of agreement, build solid foundation. If I left Mitchell tomorrow, there's a heads of agreement that ties the partnership as well. So having a formality around it. And, I'll give you another quick example. There's an organisation called Kids First. It used to be called Child Protection Society. And I've worked with them at the City of Whittlesea, and now they're working with me here. They went to government around a pilot and brought in $2 million over 2 years to work with our community to build resilience and ensure children didn't get into the system. So they're partnerships, they're real, and they can benefit communities.
Yeah, that is really, really good point about that, how you bring them along with you as well. You don't just end those ties because a project's done. There's always that future potential of them coming back into play and being useful for the community. In terms of looking at the sort of evolving relationships with the local government sector and their partners, how do you see that sort of playing out into the future? Do you think that will change? Will they become more and more prominent? How do you see that going?
For me, they're critical. Partnerships are absolutely critical. We're cash strapped. So we get developer contributions, particularly in the growth areas, but they only cover 25% of the costs. So you've got to look a bit more outside the square on how you generate revenue. Partnerships can bring in services. They can help you with infrastructure. I value them, and I see that only we can achieve outcomes together for community. I can't see local government just doing it on its own forever. And partnerships also with government. Our state and federal government are key partners as well in understanding what our priorities are. When there's grants, how do they shape them to support us? So government, not-for-profits, business sector, developers, everyone. Local government is not an island. It has to work with others.
Yes, it really does. In terms of the sort of future role of local government, how do you see that evolving as a whole sector? Do you think that's going to sort of change in how it's approaching things?
I think with local government, they still have to remain very relevant to their own communities. What is it they want to achieve? And councillors capture that in what's called our council plan. And, one thing our councillors, I think I've heard from the sector at the moment, is do the basics right. Get the basics right. But local government must do that. And our councillors, in writing their council plan, we've sat with them and we've presented some health and human services data as well, because we're incorporating a health and wellbeing plan into our council plan. Legislation says we have to do both, but we've said to council, let's do it together. And when we took them through some of our local data, they said we must have a focus on family violence and mental health. And I was very proud of them. They responded to those local health needs of the community. So I think there's this real thing about get the waste right, get, the parks and gardens presentation, and they're all absolutely important. They make people feel really good about where they live. And then also let's support community, whatever that looks like. Is it advocacy? Is it through delivery of services? Every local government must respond to the needs of their community and what their data is telling us, what it's telling them. I think that's the role of local government. You can't be all things to all people, but identify what you do. And I've always held the view, wherever I've worked, we're generalists. We do, all those generalist services, but the other layers have to do the, early intervention and tertiary services. So that's where we play an advocacy role. So identifying what your role is really critical as well. And you know what? I realise how important we are to community whenever there's a crisis. We're the first ones called in.
Yeah. Even if you aren't technically responsible or can't, necessarily do it alone, it is always local government they turn to first for the answer.
From your experience as an accomplished leader, what key trends or challenges do you foresee for local government leaders specifically, and how can they proactively start addressing them now?
I think local government is a real platform for doing things different. So leaders must think outside the norms of previous local government. So look at financial sustainability in line with working with what I said previously, partners, working with others. Where are you investing your money? Having a long-term financial plan that actually has your service planning in there, your workforce planning in there, your capital works program. Looking at shared resources with other local governments and procurement together. How can you minimise those costs? And what's really fantastic to do versus what you have to do. Looking at the leadership, the executive leadership must look at the organisation as a whole, all parts together, and that makes a fantastic team. Then you always respond to the council plan. So, the councils want to achieve what they want to achieve in 4 years. And we always say, you're part of a journey, a longer journey. So what is it, that slice that's going to make it better for communities? So I think they're really important elements. And being agile, right? I test this with my team at work, and, opportunities present and you go, oh no, the budget says no. Well, what if we moved that out a year and brought this in a year? They're challenging. So you've got to create discomfort in an organisation, I think, and move them to thinking a bit differently. And I've got, fantastic managers at Mitchell, and they do work with me on some of these, because I do poke the bear sometimes. And you know what? I know this is going to sound counterintuitive to what you've asked me, but I love using an audit and risk committee, because sometimes when you do an internal audit, someone else's eyes see something and you go, yeah, we could be doing that a bit differently. So being flexible, looking at the world very differently, partnering and working together as a team with your councillors.
And you've lined it up perfectly for my last question, which you've already kind of touched on. But what advice would you give to aspiring and current leaders looking to make a significant impact in their communities? Any final words of wisdom?
Don't make it about yourself. Always, if you stay on track and it's always about the community, you'll be the best leader in the world. But when you focus just on about your career and about your next step, forget it. If you do things well, you'll get to the next step. Let your work speak for you.
As a brilliant close and a very good piece of advice. Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing your expertise and your experience with us today. And thank you to everyone who has listened. I will be back very soon with more expert interviews for the Future Local Lab. But until then, bye.